Lauderdale, Florida, where the annual South Florida Hurricane Conference was held yesterday. This is the beginning of hurricane season today. And Florida is particularly vulnerable as a coastal state to hurricanes because of its location, because of where hurricanes track up from the Atlantic. And what you can see behind me is the reason why hurricanes are a huge coastal issue in a state like Florida. One of the great risks, or the greatest risk from hurricane damage, is the proximity to hurricane blows in. Europe is that way, and south of here, behind me, is where hurricanes come from. And when they blow in, they bring large tides. And those buildings behind me tend to be very exposed to wind and water damage. We think that Florida has been hit by a lot of very large hurricanes recently, but at the hurricane conference yesterday, the discussion was really about the fact that Florida has been very lucky and has not been hit by the kind of hurricanes that can cause 500-year catastrophic damage. Tony Carper, who is the emergency management director for Broward County, said yesterday that Florida has been very lucky, in fact, and that he thinks Florida is overdue for a really large killer hurricane. So when we study coastal policy, obviously one of the things that comes into play for managers, public officials, private sector people, as well as individuals, is that you're largely the captive of the location where you're at. You can't change that. Florida is beautiful. Everything that makes Florida a wonderful coastal area for recreation, for business, it also exposes it to great risks and great dangers. And so the question is, how do you manage the risks with the tremendous advantages and beauty and opportunities that the coastal zone provides? And we'll be looking at a case study on coastal insurance, which to me at least is the cutting-edge signature issue in coastal policy. You can't insure those buildings and those motels and condos and timeshares and private homes and businesses that are here behind me on the beach, or even inland a little bit. If you can't insure them against hurricane and flood damage, they become extremely expensive, vulnerable, and exposed pieces of investment and property. And so the question of who is going to bear the cost and the expense and the risk of insurance for all of these properties is one of the other case studies that we'll be looking at. One of the big issues along the shoreline in many parts of the United States is the conflict over what to do with property, kind of land use policy, zoning policy. Americans love the coast. Behind me, we can see the conflict, which is between intensive use of the land, which is now really expensive, condos, timeshares, large buildings that occupy many people and that have a high value added to the actual land itself, and the smaller motels and hotels and even some small personal residences that used to be all along the U.S. shores, which are now sitting on land that is extremely expensive, and where the pressure to essentially buy that land, tear down the small hotels, motels, and personal houses and put up large condos is changing the whole landscape of the coastal areas and how they're used. This is something that local governments are getting deeply involved in, and the choices are obvious. Many people jammed into large condos makes the place look different. It makes it look like a big city on the shore. It adds a lot of cost to sewage and water systems and puts a lot of pressure per square mile or square foot of coastal area on the necessity of servicing this many people with garbage collection and with traffic and roads and bridges. And obviously it also ties into the other issue we've talked about, which is hurricanes and the fact that areas such as this here on the coast are at risk, and when hurricanes arrive, you need to evacuate people, and very often that means you've got to have adequate roads and bridges to get all these people out. So this is a struggle that's going on, and I think from what you can see behind me here, and also what we're seeing in other parts of the country, the small, traditional, inexpensive, kind of laid-back facilities, hotels, and other uses of the shore are probably losing to the more economically attractive and lucrative building of large condos and large resorts and hotels. So this is an issue that continues to evolve, and that certainly concerns us as students of coastal policy and coastal land use.